Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Data Talk session from the European Data Portal and the Support Center for Data Sharing. I'm happy to introduce our two speakers today, Meera Nayyar from the Department for Transport in the UK, and Johan Herrlin from ITO World. If I pronounce your name incorrectly, please also reintroduce yourself and correct my pronunciation when I give you the floor to introduce yourself. Both will be talking about the Bus Open Data Service in the UK, which is a new initiative that was launched earlier this year and that will focus on open data for transport in the UK. For everyone's awareness, this session is going to be recorded and it'll be made live next week on Monday for those who want to rewatch it and for those who could not unfortunately join us. If you have any questions, please feel free to share it in the chat or to raise your hand and ask our two speakers as we go. To Meera and Johan, the floor is yours.
So I'm Meera Nayyar. I'm the Head of Passenger Experience in Local Transport at the Department for Transport in the UK.
Yeah, and hi everyone, my name is Johan. I am the CEO of ITO World. We are a transit data specialist company, and we do really two things. We are an aggregator of transportation data, such as public transport and micromobility for the likes of Apple Maps and Google Maps and other sort of smaller organizations that are delivering a journey planning experience for their customers. And we also have a software platform that we deliver to cities, agencies, and operators for doing similar kind of work, but for the agencies themselves. We've been working with DFT for a couple of years now on the Bus Open Data project that Meera will give an overview of next, I think.
Would you like to kick it off, Meera, and discuss what the Bus Open Data Service is, how the initiative was conceived, and what's happening in the UK right now?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jane. Yeah, so I think, so I suppose the starting point for a lot of this would have been the Bus Services Act, which was the first major piece of legislation that was passed in the UK to regulate the bus industry, which is, in the UK, the bus industry is largely deregulated. To give you a sense of the economic context, the bus industry is an industry that has been in decline in the UK. So we've seen a decline in patronage year on year since about 2009. The Competition Commission, or the Competition and Markets Authority, as it's now known, conducted an investigation into that decline, and really open data was one of the key measures that they recommended to give consumers more choice and to help them find best value tickets. So when we created the Bus Services Act and the legislation back in 2017, there was a section in there that enabled the Department for Transport and Secretary of State to legally require bus operators to openly publish data about local bus services across the country. And that included timetables, fares, and location data as well. I think just from a kind of, I suppose, a passenger perspective, a lot of the evidence that we have through the passenger watchdog, Transport Focus, highlights the need for better and increasingly centralised data about local bus services for passengers. And certainly what we've seen in areas like London, for example, so Transport for London took a policy decision as far back as 2007, and the longitudinal evaluation in 2017 demonstrated that the value of TfL's open data generated about 130 million pounds per annum in terms of benefits, so productivity benefits, job creation, etc. And so we really do feel that bus open data is an important stimulus for both the economy, but also for helping the bus industry to return to growth.
Beyond the recognition and the understanding of the decline of the bus industry in the UK at that moment, and the importance of it to be stimulated and to continue growing, how did the DFT and by extension ITO World get involved or be inspired to start using open data And how was that translated to collecting or publishing open data across the UK? I imagine that there are quite different standards and quite different methods of doing that.
Johan, do you want to respond to that one first?
Yeah, sure. So we've been involved in, as both consumers of open data and helping organizations produce open data for many years. So we've worked with other areas within the UK to sort of successfully help them open up their data. And we've seen them sort of reap some of the benefits of this. And Meera can give some of the details around how that's worked out for the West Midlands, for instance. I think one of the key things that's a little bit different, that might be a way to compare and contrast what Meera and her team have taken on versus what many other European governments have done, is that she's sort of taken it beyond a directory service where it points to, you know, the source data, and you have to go to each location to go get that source data. It's quite a different implementation, and it's much more comprehensive and delivers something that's much more useful for the end users as a result of that. So the UK market is quite complex. There are about 700 individual operators, bus operators in England that are running about 34,000 buses every day, right? So it's a big market with many different players, and they're all, you know, they're competing. It's a private market, so it is a particularly complex environment in which to operate. And as a result, you know, there needs to be a little bit more help from the government to make that data easily available to the sort of downstream consumers of that data. So what's actually being delivered as part of this is a way for the individual operators to upload the data to the portal. That data then gets run through a sort of a battery of tests to deliver a quality report back to the operators, so they can understand where they may be some issues with the data. We flag potential problems. They can then use their own tools to resolve those problems if they want to, and then they can re-upload it, run the tests again. When they're happy with it, they can then choose to go to publish that. All of that schedule data is actually being delivered in trans exchange, and that's by legislation. The real-time data, the sort of vehicle location data, is delivered in a number of different, slightly different formats, but then on the back end, we're reconciling that into a single format and deliver that out by default sort of as Siri. And then the fares data will be uploaded in Netex, and we'll deliver that out as Netex as well. But what we described there are three different types of data: for schedules, for real time, and for fares. But consumers don't necessarily want those in three different formats, right? So there has to be a process to reconcile those. So on the back end, we also have a set of services that ingest those into a model, and then matches the real time data to the schedules, and then delivers a nationwide view that is deduped and overlaps have been removed in whatever format we want. So the most commonly consumed format is going to be presumably GTFS and GTFS RT with vehicle positions associated with that. And that'll be for the whole country, and then it can be obviously filtered down to whatever level that's required. But as a result of this, there's some quality assurance that gets baked into this. There's some sort of removing of duplicate journeys. There's the simplification of delivering sort of a single nationwide view in the model, and then we can push downstream to the consumers in any format that they really want, which is quite an ambitious project. But as a result, we're hoping to deliver something that's immediately useful by the sort of consuming market of this.
Yeah, so I would say, just to add a bit more context to what Johan, everything Johan said is absolutely right, and just to kind of, I suppose, give some of the background or the backstory to how we made some of the decisions. I think actually Gianfranco was a key figure in the earlier stages of the Bus Open Data Programme, and worked with us to deliver a discovery project to help us think about the data standards landscape in the UK. So there's I think, you know, actually taking the time to deliver the discovery was of fundamental importance. And yeah, I think we in the UK we're in a slightly different position to some of our European counterparts, and so we have a deregulated industry. It's been deregulated since the 1980s, and that means bus operators have the freedom to choose. For example, how they provide passenger information, how they run their bus services, and so. One of the things that really came through to us at the discovery stage was that we asked bus operators and also local authorities and data consumers what they wanted in terms of the role of government. And the strong message that came through was that they wanted greater leadership from the government on data standards to utilise, and that currently the data landscape and the data standards landscape in particularly in England was a bit very fragmented and essentially quite messy. So we took some decisions quite early on, and a big factor in our decision making was, essentially we were regulating and creating legislation to require bus operators to publish this data. And so what that meant was it needed to actually work for the bus operators. It needed to be something that could be implemented, and that they actually were, were statutory requirements that they were able to meet, because otherwise we're at risk of going through, so probably have similar processes in Europe, but judicial reviews, etc. And so we selected industry-specific standards like TransExchange and also Siri for the location data. The interesting one was, so FIRS data was a real gap in our provision. And so in the UK, we already had largely open timetable data. We had about a half-baked data set for location stroke real-time data, but we had no FIRS data that was openly provided in this country. And the real challenge or barrier had been around the lack of an agreed national publishing standard for FIRS data. We do participate in the MTIS programme, which some of you will be familiar with. So that's an European Commission programme, delegated regulation, and as part of that we received grant funding to create a Netex data standard, which was very, very much appreciated. And so one of the really important milestones for the programme was the delivery of the Netex data standard in the UK. It's specifically being utilised for buses data and FIRS data in particular, but we are looking to see how we roll that out to timetables, and there's a real desire from the bus operators and the bus industry to see Netex rolled out more broadly. The interoperability across countries, across member states, and also the multimodal nature of Netex made it inherently appealing as a data standard, and we do believe that it is a future-proof data standard, and currently, although we won't be required to implement Netex, we are certainly looking within DFT and across the data teams and across the modes as to how Netex could be utilised in the multimodal space.
Thank you. Another part that was also briefly discussed in the blog post that you have written about the Bus Open Data Service, and was that this work you're doing and deliveries that are coming from this initiative will contribute to the government's manifesto commitment to open data from 2020 onwards. So what does this entail, and what is beyond the BODS for the UK government going forward?
I think that's a really great question. I should say that I think Amy is on the call, but it was actually Amy Bridge who wrote the article. But in terms of the manifesto commitment, so it was a manifesto commitment back in 2015 and 2017 for the Conservative government in the UK. Real desire to openly publish more data about local services, and to improve the delivery of those local services through digital data. I have to be perfectly honest with you, it's not a current manifesto commitment, but it is something that the government are incredibly committed to as a BAU type service. And digital and data, probably similar to lots of other European governments, we're currently going through our spending review planning process at the moment. And digital and data is one of our biggest priorities. And so, you know, I think in terms of what that means for bus open data, we are currently we launched the service back in January to openly publish timetables data. The service will technically go live in January 2021 with timetables, fares and location data. And then beyond that, we'll look to consider how we can incorporate other types of data into that service, other modes, and really shift the focus away from bus to more like public transport. Johan, I don't know if you've got anything, any reflections from an ITO perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so there's no sort of technical limitation in terms of the architecture that's been built that prevents it from growing geographically to cover not just England but the devolved nations of the UK and or to use other modes, right? So it's agnostic to the data types it is that are input into the system, and it is agnostic to the modes, and it's agnostic to the outputs, right? So that's sort of the idea that any data can be loaded in, and any data can be pushed out and transformed into whatever format that's needed by the industry in order to make the most of it. So hopefully that kind of reduces any dependency on needs that are here today, but may change in the future as well.
Thank you. I also want to open the floor to the audience if they have any questions or if they want to jump in to something that you touched upon already that they would like more details in. I leave them to either share in the chat or to jump in by unmuting themselves. Otherwise, I do have a few other questions. For starters going, so we know that there are several benefits to publishing more data as open, and you already mentioned some, for example, over 130 million pounds annually from publishing data as open and from the transport services in the UK. Beyond this quantitative and immediate benefit, what are some of the long-term benefits that you've noticed already observed by these data providers publishing these data sets as open?
Who wants to start?
You're more than welcome to, Meera.
Okay. Yeah, so I think there's yeah, I suppose the really element of bus open data is, yeah, I think, yeah, going beyond standard journey planning and feeding the data into journey planners, which is what the service was originally conceived to do. Is actually realising some of the true innovation benefits. So seeing what could be created that nobody had ever possibly conceived of before. And so I suppose some of the discussions that we're having at the moment are, I mean, Johan mentioned one yesterday, which probably Johan elaborate on a bit more, but looking at digital transformation of essentially the process of government and how you use the data to digitally transform some of our delivery functions. But actually, you know, going into next year when we have a live location data set, one of the things that my team in particular will be really focused on is innovation and what we can do to work with the transport tech sector to really stimulate and nurture that transport tech sector in the UK and encourage them to utilise the data being provided in pods to deliver you know, any range of innovation. But I suppose some of the big challenges that we're grappling with at the moment in government are really probably the same as many of you, decarbonisation and clean air. And so you know, how do we use, for example, bus live location data to provide technology to the bus industry to help them optimise EV and you know, low emission buses and zero emission buses, battery charging, and then also just things like route optimization technologies for local authorities. You know, there's a whole range of innovations that can be delivered. But yeah, I think that would be the kind of, I suppose, interesting space that we'll enter into next year. Johan, do you want to say a little bit about the digital transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about open data in general, most people tend to think of the sort of canonical use cases, which is sort of the developer community that consumes those services and creates innovative end user products that hopefully drive efficiency and create a better passenger experience and, you know, generate the sort of economic benefits that Meera mentioned. And of course, those are incredibly important. And those are sort of the most, I guess, obvious and visible benefits of opening up data. But what we've always found when we work with organizations to help them open up their data is that the process of opening up the data creates many benefits for the organization that's actually performing that process. So by opening up the data, you're forced to get better processes in place, better data in place, better standards in place, and so on. And that has lots and lots of downstream benefits that are less visible, right? So, you know, we think about it as there are straight economic benefits that Meera talked about. There are many passenger benefits of getting this data out as broadly as possible and into the hands of passengers. And then, of course, there are governance benefits. So now that all this data is produced and that it's organized and that it's you know, real time is matched to schedules and so on and so forth, we can actually begin to archive all of that data and then do reporting and analysis on both the real time and the historical data. And this is at a nationwide level, right? So part of this will be delivering sort of the network analysis and performance metrics and sort of a dashboard that is used by national government, by local government, by regulators, and by operators themselves. And of course, because all of this data is being ingested, we can leverage that to help sort of digitally transform some of those organizations. So you can think about, you know, the regulators that have to worry about, you know, are buses really performing on time, are operators performing to the level that they said they were going to, and so on and so forth, or if they get complaints, perhaps, how do they verify those things? It's quite challenging to do if you don't have your sort of finger on the pulse of what's going on within a large bus network of 700 operators. But in the future, they're simply just going to be able to go to this data set and query either what's going on right now, what happened last week, last month, at this particular day, on this street, for this bus stop, and so on and so forth. They'll have all of that data at their fingertips and the tools to exploit that data and ask those questions. So that's quite a significant change from the way it's been in the past. So I think that's a huge benefit that's often overlooked. And then I think the other thing is, you know, normally, if you just kind of let this all, you know, be handled by the private market, we tend to see that main cities like London and so on and so forth are served really well by that, because it's a huge market and private organizations can get in there, do all the work that's required to produce an app and get at that data, because it sort of makes sense for them economically to do so in a huge market. But in more rural areas, or even, you know, areas that aren't super dense like London, we see that they don't do that because it's too much work, right? So, you know, opening up this data in a way that at a nationwide level is very significant, right? Because it sort of levels the playing field for organizations to go in anywhere within the country and be able to create these apps and improve passenger experience, even in areas that aren't super densely populated like London. So I think that sort of like geographic equity is super important to help stimulate innovation in non-dense urban environments as well.
Do you know of other initiatives in different countries in Europe that are doing something similar?
So I think, I mean, for example, Finland created their multimodal legislation, so that was, you know, essentially included a clause, you know, no data, no servers, basically. So anyone wanting to operate transport services, public transport services, as I understand it, were required to openly publish their data as a condition, and also to sign up to work with one MAS type provider. And then similarly, to be honest, as part of the MTIS programme across Europe, I think there's at least 17 member states participated in MTIS, the Multimodal Travel Information Services Programme. And I suppose the three main conditions attached to participating in MTIS is for member states rather than the observer state. So the implementation of the delegated regulations, so basically requiring operators to openly publish data using the Netex data standard, the creation of a country level profile for the Netex data standard, and also the creation of a NAP, or as some countries have taken it upon themselves to do so, the creation of multiple NAPs. The UK is one of those countries that will end up having multiple NAPs. And so I think essentially there's a whole range of countries who are creating open data platforms, regulations, and data standards to drive forward the open publication of data. I have to be honest, I could probably dig out the contact details for the person who's leading MTIS now in the European Commission, but that has been a bit of changeover. But yeah, I mean, yes, I think Norway, Finland, yeah, Turkey, there were a whole host of countries, 17 total, who are participating in that. Each have really interesting and different stories to tell.
Thank you. Also good for us to investigate and also to see what else is being done out there. Can you share information about the economics of the service, especially for small bus operators? And are there ways of making it financially, operationally easy for these small firms?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, to be honest. And I think it's something we've had to have really at the forefront of our minds from the start. So, yeah, our primary legislation set out at the start there would be no exemptions, i.e. all operators of all sizes would be required to participate and to openly provide data. And so I suppose what that meant was we needed to provide a service that created a bit of a level playing field. In terms of how that's practically translated, there's a few things that we've done. We've prioritised smaller operators as part of our user research from day one. We've worked with a few local authorities who have a high proportion of smaller operators. So rural local authorities in particular tend to have lots of smaller operators who serve them. So smaller operators have been priority in terms of our user research activity. And then in terms of the actual the design of the service itself, so there's been two things. We have enabled operators to provide data either via an API or through a URL link, which suits the larger and the medium-sized operators, and some of the smaller operators who are a bit more tech savvy or have more resources. But some of the smallest and the micro operators really aren't able to provide data in that way and need tools, first of all, to help them create data in the first instance, so to solve the upstream data creation issue. And we have given them access to free tools to help them create their timetables and FIRS data in particular. And then we have also given them the option to upload their data as a file upload. It's essentially a CSV or an Excel upload, and that suits particularly the micro operators. Especially so that's really played out in the service design. Other things that we've done, we've offered free hosting for smaller operators as well, to make sure that operators who wouldn't know how to set up a hosted site and don't already have a hosted site can host their data. And more recently, we've started to build agent mode functionality in the service, which essentially enables the local authority to assume publishing responsibility for the operator, and that will disproportionately benefit the smaller operators. So I think there's a whole range of things that we have done to support smaller operators, but I think you're absolutely right to highlight that enabling smaller operators to participate is a major challenge. It has to be overcome, and you will know yourself, anyone who's involved in open data, that getting the data onto a service is easy. Maintaining and updating the data and keeping it of the highest quality is the more difficult, challenging part. And it's smaller operators who really are going to need the most support here, which is why we think agent mode is just fundamental to having a high quality, accurate and up-to-date data set on boards. Johan, I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, no, I think you answered it really well. I think the point for me was that as Meera and the team were conceiving this thing, small operators were front and center, and definitely not an afterthought in this, right? So because it's an incredibly long tail, as you can imagine, with hundreds of operators in the UK market, there are a number of big ones, and then there's lots and lots and lots of small ones, right? So it was baked into the thinking and the design right from the beginning, which I think is really key to this being a successful when working with those small folks. I think the other thing is some of those data quality tools are also really helpful for that audience, because it allows them to create some data, upload it, test it, make sure that they can see any flags that get raised with that data, and then resolve those, and so on and so forth. And so that becomes sort of a baked-in learning process for that. And the same thing is going to be true for the real-time data. There's going to be actually monitoring and alerting mechanisms. So if half the buses drop out of a feed, they're going to be alerted. The operators will be alerted, and they'll be told that there's something wrong with the feed. And obviously, smaller operators simply don't have those kinds of mechanisms on their own. And so, getting that through a centralized system is very, very useful for them. So I think there are a number of specific improvements that will help those folks.
There's a follow-up question to that, and a thanks for the reply. The follow-up is, in terms of longer-term vision, will payments and integrated multimodal ticketing, will they be a feature in your roadmap as it raises new issues for fares data and dynamic pricing? Or is it legislatively out of scope for the UK?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, actually. Yeah, so I think there's definitely I mean, essentially you use the term yourself, integrated and smart ticketing. Open data and smart ticketing go hand in hand. It's open data sits as part of essentially the integrated and smart ticketing team in England, and similarly in Scotland and Wales. So it's absolutely the next step for us. For some of you who are very clued up on UK politics, you'll know that the current government are really passionate about buses. Actually, it's a really great time to be in local transport and to work with buses. There's a real desire to stimulate the bus market. And last September, there were some quite public announcements about increased funding for the sector. But also some commitments that were required in return for that funding, and in particular contactless and multi-op ticketing was one of those commitments. So we are currently considering how we support the industry to become 100% contactless, and how that might work in practice. And I would not say it's a priority this year. I can see it becoming an increasing priority next year. And then as part of that, once you have then enabled the industry to become 100% contactless and upgraded their tech, or supported them to upgrade their own tech, then how then do you encourage them or expedite the move towards multi-op ticketing? And bus open data does achieve that to some extent in the creation of first data standards and requiring the industry to create that data in the first instance. But you do also need the operators to participate in schemes, and in a deregulated market space, the major challenge has always been about really supporting the industry to reach agreements about essentially profit share. Johan, I don't know if you have anything from a tech perspective you wanted to add, maybe from a mass perspective.
I guess so. The only thing I would say is that, of course, the vision of an integrated ticketing system across a whole nation is great, right? And it is particularly challenging in a deregulated market such as the UK. So I think it will take a while to get there if we ever do get there. But I think, to me, the steps that BODS is taking is building this sort of foundational layer that enables all of that innovation to happen when if as and when the industry is ready for that to occur, and whatever legislation needs to come to support that, and so on and so forth. But it's the next step after having created the bus open data service, integrating multi modes and so on and so forth, and making it accessible everywhere. Then what else can be done, and clearly ticketing is on the horizon, but it is a very particularly complex issue in this market. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you for your answer. In light of time, I think we can open it to one more question from the audience. If anyone wants to come in to ask, either on chat or through their audio. The last question, for those who still want to stay, is the arrangement as described takes the SRI-Netex data and dupes to GTFS, GTFS-RT. Is it possible to go straight to GTFS? I think Johan.
Yeah, so I should make sure I understand the question properly before I answer it. But my understanding is that you're asking whether it's possible to get the raw data, so to speak, in GTFS without removing the overlapping services. It is certainly would be possible to do that, though that is not what we're planning on delivering initially. But there's no, that's just a decision that was made about creating the best user experience for the scenario in mind. The main thrust of it is that we can ingest any data in whatever format it's in, and because we are ingesting it into a model, we can then transform the data into any output. The sort of deduping and removing of overlap simply creates a regionally clean data set that doesn't confuse journey planners downstream. Now, GTFS and GTFS-RT are not the only formats that are available, so you can get the individual files that have been uploaded as trans-exchange, and you can get the Siri real-time directly as well, aggregated to the whole nation or queried by region or by operator and so on and so forth. So there are lots of different ways to get to the data, but we haven't envisioned just translating the individual trans-exchange files into GTFS. There hasn't been a requirement to do that to date, but it's technically relatively trivial.
Thank you very much, Johan. And thank you very much, everyone, for Johan and Meera, especially for the very interesting talks and for your insights from both the political and governance perspective and from the technical perspective. This video will be live and shared next Monday, as I stated earlier. For those who have not yet already, there is also a blog post written on the European Data Portal Country Insights UK page that actually discusses the bus open data service and complements this session. If you have any additional questions for our speakers or for the team, please reach out to us and we can put people in touch. In the meantime, have a great day and the rest of your week. And thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.